Okay, so I'm back at the bus today. There's high winds today, so I was trying to get a few more bolts on these panels so that they didn't get bent, or if a strong enough gust came along, possibly rip the bolt heads out through the holes. So anyway, I'm just drilling the bottom row right now, and things are fairly calm at the moment. It was gusting earlier, but I've got a couple more bolts in, so we should be good. Okay, so I've got the bottom row drilled for rivets. Rivet holes are drilled here, and I'll fill it with caulk. Just run a bead down the seam, and then I'll put caulk on each rivet as I insert it. I'll run that whole row along the bottom, and then I'm going to tighten up tension in the middle. After I do that with the bolts, I'll go up to the top rail and drill those holes, and similarly I will caulk those holes and rivet them. Alright, it's getting fairly late, after 8 o'clock p.m. I've got the bottom row of rivets in place, and then I've started going up that hat channel where the seam, or where the overlap is, to help secure it all together. Got that clamped in wood. I think the wind has died down for sure, hopefully. But regardless, the bus is secure. These sheets should not flop out of the top. Although I don't have any rivets up top, there's enough in the bottom and middle that I'm not really worried that there's going to be a problem with them getting pulled out by the wind. So after I got the bottom row done, I've been going back and forth, one row of rivets at a time, down the side of the bus for the new panels, and then go outside and I fill the caulk in and rivet from the outside. Then I go one level up and another level, etc. I've got these holes here drilled. Things are starting to stiffen up enough that I can drill more holes at a time. So at this point I'm gonna probably drill up to about the halfway mark and then start drilling holes across the middle so I can get more riveting done at a shot as I'm outside. Okay, so I've got about 4 holes drilled on each of these hat channels. I'm waiting to do the same here. I've got to maybe check the caulk in the middle before I put more holes in. So, just doing a good chunk of work at a time. Not more than I can finish before I have to take off. Okay, so I've got the rivets climbing up the hat channel slowly but surely here. I guess a little more tomorrow. Just putting a little bit of effort in each day is what I've been doing, so I don't wear my arm out. So I'm at the point now where I'm drilling from the inside. I'm going to put a clamp over the top there to hold back pressure, but I'm drilling the holes through the sheet metal from the inside. I'm going to drill them all and then run a bead of caulk, and I'm going to decided to start using 1/4-inch bolts, pushing from the outside in sporadically along the top rail, mostly along the hat channels, maybe one in the middle, to kind of pull things together so that when I rivet from the outside, the top rail is going to be nice and tight. As to whether I leave those bolts in or not is a question mark. I guess it really doesn't matter if I leave them in. They've got lock washers, lock nuts. So anyhow, I'm going to keep drilling. Okay, so this is what I mean by holding the clamp to pinch together the sheet metal while drilling. Closer to the clamp, it'll work better. And I actually think I've gotten about all I'm going to get out of this bit. As you can see, I've been using it a lot. Had caulk on it and stuff. It's time to swap bits. I can always sharpen this one and use it later if I run out of new ones. And here I'll show the difference. A sharp bit mix. It's much faster. And that was with holding the camera, so not the best technique. So I made pretty good progress drilling the holes out. Got from there to about there in the last, I would say, 30 minutes or so. But got to get home, making dinner. Okay, so I'm back at the bus. It's a fairly rainy, dreary, kind of cold day here in April. And I'm just going to drill some holes inside since it's raining. I'll keep at it with the drill. Lots of holes to get done. Alright, so I've got a few more sections here to go on the top rail, drilling through the sheet metal. So okay, so I finished the hole drilling on the top rail all the way over. Now I'm going to start drilling holes for 3/16 rivets in these middle channels at the top and bottom edge. I'm going to drill them all the way across. Since it's raining outside, I don't think I'm driving many rivets, just because I don't want to end up soaked. Alright, so I used the 2x4 that I had laid out some markings on for the center. These are measured 12 inches down from the top lip of these. And these were put up with a spacer, I think 16 inches from that edge right there. You know, so that way from the outside the line will be fairly uniform and look similar. And then I also remembered right here is where the window is going to be for the kitchen sink. So I marked that. And then obviously this is the living room window, or one of the living room windows where we did not put the hat channel in. It's going to be a bigger window, wider than one segment, so we didn't put a hat channel cap in there. So anyhow, I'm going to start drilling the 1/4-inch holes in on these marks in these centerpieces. The idea of these centerpieces is to fill the gap that was left. I don't know if you can see it here. Well, this might not be the best place. Let's see if we can see it here. Yeah, see here, you'll see the thickness of the metal has a gap because this is 2 layers of hat channel, and here's the hat channel cap, and the original hat channel's not there. So we put these 2 layers in because 2 of them together are the same width as 14 gauge, which is the width of the hat channel. So it evens things out, but then putting the rivets here is also going to stiffen up this wide span of metal and keep it from rattling as we head down the road, give it some extra durability and structure. And then these edges are actually folded. That's why I flipped the direction on these when I put them in. The folded edge here would be too thick, squeezed in. Well, it's really a concern where they're against the hat channels. So anyway, it looks kludgy, but there's a serious method to the madness with this center panel, both as a fill for riveting at the right depth or level to give the mating surface some fill, but also to stiffen up the panels with extra rivets in the middle. So that's the idea. I'm going to start drilling some more holes here. Seems like it's been what I've been doing every day, drilling holes. So anyhow, lots to do. Alright, so I've drilled the 1/4-inch holes through the middle panels, and I'm just about drilling 1/4-inch holes on this side, which will allow me to seal everything up with rivets if this rain stops. I don't really want to get soaked doing that job. And then once I've got the 1/4-inch rivets in, I'll finish drilling these holes that I've marked You see I'm doing every third hole. That actually divides out nicely. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 3/16 rivets, top and bottom, on each sheet at the edges. So in essence, we've got 5 rows of rivets between the 1/4 inch and the 3/16, plus the rivets through the hat channels. So definitely structural when I'm done. Okay, so I've got the top lip caulked up. I actually decided I'm going to use a mix of rivets and 1/4 inch bolts to pull the top lip in. And so we'll start with the bolts. That'll tighten things up. And after that, we've got most of the holes drilled here. My expectation is by the end of the day, hopefully I'll be started with the layout on the other side. Getting holes drilled over on this side of the bus, because this side should be fully riveted in place by that point. So that's the plan. Well, we're finished for today. We got most of the rivets on this half done, and got the top rail mounted with rivets halfway across and bolts as well. And then we got bolts through the top for the remainder to squeeze it together, since I'd already caulked it. So at this point, we've got some more riveting to do, and this side will be finished. Be ready to move on to the other side. Okay, so yesterday was Saturday. Got the top rail bolted in place with Sikaflex behind for sealing. I'll be putting the rivets in the top rail, and hopefully I'll finish riveting all these panels in the next few hours, and this side of the bus will be completed. But anyway, right now I'm just using a drill bit to clean up these holes after aligning, or after fastening with bolts. They don't necessarily align perfectly, so it's necessary to get the rivets in from outside to run a quick drill bit through the holes and clean up the edges. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'll finish drilling the few remaining holes in the hat channels, and then, except for the 3/16 rivets, we'll be done with this side. Okay, so I'm getting real close to finishing this side. I've got everything done. 1, 2, 3, 4, well, 3.5 hat channels over from the front, and then in the back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hat channels over. So I have basically 3 more sections to do, and then I'll be finished with this side, and I'll have a little mini celebration here. Okay, so I've got all but those last 12 holes there on that hat channel riveted, as far as the 1/4 inch rivets go, and that'll be it for this side for 1/4 inch rivets. Don't know if I'm doing the 3/16 later. Probably will. Probably do them at the end. So anyhow, I'm gonna get back at it. Okay, so in preparation to put the curved piece on this end around the front, I have taken the rivets and ground them out, hit a little primer on that after I made it flush, so that way I can put a trim piece over top to bottom when I'm done here to make this look better. And then also I have ground that rust stain that you might have seen in other videos from this being laid in the pavilion. Ground that off with a wire wheel. I'm just going to hit it with some spray primer for now. There'll be a lot more prep before we paint, so probably skim coats and things like that to cover up any uneven spots or whatnot, scratches, etc. So anyway, I'm going to hit it with some primer at this point. Okay, so that should keep the rust at bay for a little while anyway, getting a coat of spray primer on the parts I scuffed up. Putting some here where we're going to overlay metal, just because, well, it's open, why not? Okay, so I'm trying to bend this piece to fit the corner. It's a bit challenging. I think what I'm going to end up doing is using bolts to kind of draw it in slowly, bit by bit, a couple bolts at a time, and kind of rivet the bottom section as I go from this edge all the way toward the back, and that should hopefully straighten things out, although I'll need to pull that bottom edge down. So I may be able to do this with Klecos. I'll have to try that with 3/16 before I use 1/4-inch bolts to draw it together, but yeah, maybe not. I mean, that's a lot of tight bend on the corner. It'd be nice if I had a radius machine for metalworking, but I'm just going to use redneck ingenuity on this one. Okay, so I got this side of the bus completely done, except for the 3/16 rivets, which I'll do later. But the sheets are up. The spots where you don't see the rivets going across in the middle are where windows are going to go. So we're going to have one large window there, a kitchen sink window in that spot there, and a bedroom window on the last panel there. So, but this side is all put together. Miracle of miracles. Okay, so back to work here on the corner of the bus. You can see I put some 3/16 rivets in here, and I've got some up there, so hopefully I can keep this straight and flush where I want it as I walk it across. This corner is kind of challenging to bend. I've got the top part of it bent tight. I've got it clamped in place to one of the hat channels to hold its position. The bottom's still bending out a little bit, but that'll kind of come in as we go. So probably as I go about halfway through the corner here with rivets in that top angle, I'm going to let that clamp loose and try to start riveting this bottom corner in the right line as well. Hopefully it maintains the line for me. This is challenging though, because I don't have a radius bender for the sheet metal. So I'm trying to bend it manually as I go. Okay, so this is a bit tricky. So I'm past the point now where I left these open because I can slot another sheet in behind. But I'm past the point where I'm using these 3/16 rivets. I'm going to switch to 1/4-inch. This is awfully messy, of course, but a wire brush will clean that up. And my intention is to bring another sheet of metal probably to about right there. I might cut half a foot off of a sheet of 18 gauge after I get a layer underneath here. I'm going to get it kind of in position, and then I'm going to cap the front with another piece of metal to make it extra strong for the wind, and also to make sure it's watertight by having an overlapping layer there with a lot of caulk under it. So that's the plan. And then right now I'm going to switch to, around the corner, I'm going to drill some holes and switch to 1/4-inch bolts to cinch that corner up, because it's starting to want to spread a bit on the edge at the top there. Okay, so at it here on the next day on the corner of the bus, you can see I've flattened this out a little bit. I'm going to use some bolts to suck it in. I'm kind of hitting it with at the bottom, hitting it with the 2x4 with the hammer to try to get it to suck in enough that I can get the hole drilled and the bolt through. One hole at a time, so hopefully that works out and doesn't look goofy with the bend, but we'll see what we get. This is not the optimal way to do this. Well, auto body technician I am not. Apparently trying to keep it straight while wrapping around a corner is difficult. I neglected to look at the bowing there of the top lip there on the sheet metal, and that caused things to get out of alignment. So I cut this, and what I'm going to do is just overlap a sheet there and re-square it. Then I'm going to hide the ugliness behind trim pieces, probably a 14 gauge, some kind of heavier sheet metal that'll cinch everything in. But yeah, it's pretty ugly. I am definitely not skilled at bending metal manually, but we'll make it look pretty in the end. Alright, so I'm going to end up ripping this corner out and redoing it. It's just too much buckling. I mean, I'm not really a perfectionist, but that's too much even for me as far as out of whack. So that'll get replaced, but for now I'm going to shift to the other side, getting the side panels on. I may want to get a machine shop to help me put a bend in the metal for that front. But we got a 36-inch exterior steel door. They only had it pre-hung. I'm not going to use the frame, but I decided instead of trying to bastardize the side door that was on the bus here, instead of bastardizing that, I'm just going to put a plain Jane steel door on the side. So it'll roughly fit right between these hat channels with some angle iron put in place. And I'm going to raise it up a little bit to account for the where the floor is going to be on the bottom. And from there we'll be about 3 or 4 inches from the top. So from this top rail, so that'll be easy to fill in. And I think it's a good plan. It'll allow for getting larger objects into the bus, and I'll likely put some kind of bolt through it to allow for a security brace above a child's height, so that if I ever have grandkids on the bus, they can't open the door while we're driving. I'll have a 2x4 or something blocking it, or some kind of security mechanism, maybe just a clasp up high. So anyhow, that's the plan. Take that off the hanging that they did, and we'll fabricate our own out of metal. And so I may start cutting this out here today. Okay, so the plan here is that door is going to mount on this hat channel here and stretch over to basically this one. So what I'm going to do is just cut down the line of this channel after I take a measurement, and cut all the way down to where it's about 3 inches off the floor, because that's where the bottom of the door is going to go. So I got to make some marks, and then I'm going to get the angle grinder going. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is unbolting the door while it's held in to some degree by the frame. Just using a ratchet to undo these bolts, and then I'll be cutting things back. Mostly cutting this back. I think I'll leave this as normal as I can, right through here as the edge for the new door. It'll get capped with angle iron, but I may trim the angle iron down a little bit. I don't know what I'll do in here. I'm sure I'll have to do something here where the bumps are. But anyhow, I'll get that unbolted, and from there I'm going to make my cuts over here for the new door coming down here, preserving preserving the rub rails as much as I can. So ultimately they'll probably get trimmed back. So anyhow, plan will evolve as I work through it. Okay, so with the help of some vice grips and a ratchet, I got the 6 bolts removed from the hinge. I'm going to pull the door out at this point and set it beside the bus here. Just like the back window, that door is much heavier than you might think it is. Really was a bit of a strain to get it all, pulled out by myself. So surprisingly heavy. Must be framed out inside with some significant iron, so or steel tubes. Okay, so the goal here was to be 3 inches off the floor to allow for the insulation board and a layer of plywood, and then a layer of thin flooring, and then put the bottom of the door in. So the 2x4s stacked on top of each other are 3 inches. I use that to help guide a tape mark that'll come across to run the angle grinder just under that tape. That'll cut over, and then I'm going to cut down right at the edge of the channel, and as I hit hat channels I will go outside and cut those, probably from the outside, so that I can do a nicer job at it. So anyhow, I'm going to get at it here. I said hat channels, I actually meant rub rails. Alright, so I'm slotting the metal down. Now I'm going to cut over. I got to change my angle grinder blade. After I do that, then I'm going to go down that hat channel. That'll help me scribe a line from the outside to go finish the cut. And so then I'll take this piece off. I'll probably chunk that hat channel just above here and get it separated. So anyway, piece by piece, I'll get this carved out. Okay, so I've got that slotted, coming up there with that on the outside. So at this point, I'm going to continue that line over, probably with a square. I'll mark it from the outside. I should be able to cut this hat channel out here before it's time to take off for the day. I'll probably separate it there just to have it break free when I get the outside cuts done. Okay, so cut the top bar off. I think I'm gonna probably make the outside cut there and then quit for today. It's a soggy, nasty evening. Got to get home and make some dinner. We got some cinder blocks to line our garden beds at our house. So anyhow, yeah, gonna make one more cut and then we'll take off for today. Okay, so there's the cut line coming down from the outside, and it'll go over to right in here. So I'm going to cut right at the bottom of this channel, just above those bolts or screws. You can cut across. So I ought to be able to separate this piece here in a minute. Okay, so I got the angle grinder. I've slotted that down. Came over here. I should be at the point where hopefully if I wiggle it, it'll separate. Okay, so I wiggled and jiggled it. I got just a little bit of metal right there holding it on. Hopefully I can get in there with the grinder. We'll see. Okay, so I got that cut. There was some insulation in the middle there. Got it all chopped. I'll trim that metal back. But at this point, I'll back up a little bit. We've got a nice wide door opening. The door does not have a cant like the side of the bus does, so it will protrude a little bit outside, 2 or 3 inches. It's going to be square. I have to do a little metal fabrication to brace that in, but once I expose the hat channel and I'm able to put it up to the ceiling there, I'll be able to work off of that to create the right rough opening for the door. Okay, so I've started separating the hat channel here just to see what I was getting into. It'll be easy enough to cut apart. Out here I'm going to cut these rivets off. Or screw, yeah, rivets. I'll cut the heads of the rivets off. I don't actually think I'm going to have to trim the rub rails back here because of the edge of the hat channel. I measured from this edge right here of this hat channel over to this edge right here of this one. We're just about 36 inches, which is the rough opening I need. So I have to do a more careful measurement, but I may be able to just fill in the space here and lay angle iron over after I put some skin up against it. Lay angle iron over. Do the same thing here. Lay angle iron over. I may need to grind an 1/8 of an inch out along the hat channel. But at that point I'll have the rough opening I need, and I can adjust the angle so that the door is going to be perpendicular to the floor, even though there's a cant of 1 inch or 2 by the time we get to the top here for the actual walls, because of the way that they built the angles on the hat channels. So anyhow, it's actually coming along pretty quick and easy, but I'm going to call it quits for today.